Good morning, everybody. Apologise for us just being a minute late on, just last minute sorting out at our end. Welcome to Cloud Security Week here from Bytes. This is our first session that we have done. So you'll all have to bear with us. I think those of you that have seen these kind of events before, if there's going to be any teething problems, they're always on the first session. So we'll try to muddle our way through and make sure everything works properly for you. But if we do have any issues with this being the first one, obviously for those of you that are joining us for the next 3 days, I would imagine that we won't have any on the next one. So let's just run through why we're here and what we're here to get out of the next few days. Cloud as a topic has become more and more important. I think back 10 years, cloud basically meant a rack in a data center somewhere. It didn't mean anything more than that. Now cloud can mean fundamentally anything. People have cloud services from Google or Apple or whoever they use for their tablets and their mobile devices. Businesses have cloud services. Businesses have hybrid cloud services where they've got stuff in different places. And I don't even think there is a definition of there is obviously if you go onto Wikipedia, but for every business, the phrase cloud means something different. And what we're here to do this week is to explain to you all the technology that we as Bytes can help sell you into cloud to enable it in a more effective way for your business. So we're going to cover fundamentals today, talk about specifically public cloud tomorrow, and then into cloud applications on day 3. 9 sessions. And we have security leaders from both vendors and from other areas. I'm going to call myself a cloud leader, maybe security, but not cloud. But we'll all be around throughout the sessions. We have Q&As, we have polls, and it is meant to be interactive. So guys, please do ask questions and put them through on the Q&A, and we will field them. And please do respond to the polls. There is the odd prize around for poll responses and things like that for asking questions. So please do interact with us on these. Otherwise, it makes it drag on a little bit from our point of view. And you can always tell a canned question versus a real question. So please do ask some real ones. Don't make me revert to my canned question list. Bit of housekeeping. Well, I would imagine most of you are at home. So your fire exit is probably behind you. As I said, please do ask questions. Please do interact. They will all be recorded. All sessions will be recorded so you can watch them back, share them with colleagues, etc. And please do give us some feedback. If you don't give us any feedback, we can't improve these sessions in the future. And there's a £100 shopping voucher. There you go for feedback surveys. So always worth your time to do them. So first things first, let's talk just a little bit about Bytes. I apologize to those of you that are doing multiple sessions and not just one. You're probably going to get quite bored of this by the end of the week. Listen to this first one if you're here, but then feel free to make yourself a coffee in the other introduction ones, because I'm not going to be saying anything radically different until I get to the last slide, if I'm being honest. So today's session, I'm just going to give a quick intro, as I said. I'm going to talk a little bit about what, in my opinion, holds cloud deployments back. I'm sure if we were all able to meet in a bar at an actual event, we'd have a healthy debate about whether or not I'm right about that. But unfortunately, we can't, which means you just have to listen to me. And then Stephen Archer from F5 is going to go through migration hurdles, how to resolve the challenges, and strong security during migration. We will be doing some couple of quick breaks and questions kind of at the midway point, just to make sure that we keep your attention, because it's otherwise quite a long session for you all to be sat in front of the screen. And then we'll be doing an open Q&A at the end. So like I said, please do throw some questions at us. Let's just quickly, I think we got a poll up. We should have a poll up if I haven't referred to it. And the first poll that I'd like you to all respond to, just to make sure that you've got the hang of it and you're working properly, is coffee. I do have coffee. I'm going to have a quick swig before we go on. But if you just let us know if you've got enough coffee or not, that'd be great. Just respond to that. It just means that we know where everything's working. I know how quickly to expect a response through to the polls, so I know what's going on. And we can go on from there. Now, when the moment I ask for you to respond to a poll, one of the quirks of our system is we do have a slight lag. What that means is I have to randomly talk for 20 to 30 seconds after asking you to respond to a poll to make sure that we know things are actually working, so that I get kind of a green light to move on from somebody and people are actually responding to it. So I think I've probably talked about random rubbish for long enough there, and we've probably got some stuff happening. So let's talk a little bit about Bytes, and specifically a little bit about the security division at Bytes. Within Bytes, we have 65 security specialists, over £100 million in revenue devoted to security. For those of you that don't know, and I think we've been through this a number of times over the last year, but just to cover it all off, and thank you all, by the way, responding to the poll. It's good. I've seen the answers. I'm particularly loving the fact that we've got a fairly big number for there is never enough coffee. However, a bit worried about the number of people drinking tea this morning. Always worries me that. So anyway, on the 1st of March 2020, 23 days before the start of lockdown, we thought it'd be a really good idea to integrate the Bytes Security Partnerships business as it was then into the main Bytes business here in the UK. Obviously, we didn't have a crystal ball, otherwise we probably wouldn't have decided to do that at that time, but never mind. It's quite difficult to get used to working with a whole different group of people when you're in lockdown. But we've muddled through, and over the last year, we've enhanced the security portfolio of the business. So we have all the things that Bytes Security Partnerships used to do, which I'll come on to in a second, but this is really a summary of how the business looks. For those of you that don't know what the broader business looked like, this is kind of the timeline of security within Bytes. So Security Partnerships, as it was actually founded in 1999, depressingly or happily, depending on which way you look at it. I started working for Security Partnerships on January the 17th, 2000. As I'm prone to say, I could have murdered somebody and been out by now. We were fundamentally a checkpoint and minesweeper vendor at that time, for any of you that remember the WebSweeper and MailSweeper branding that Minesweeper used to use. And those were the three products, and WebSense, that we used to deploy back then. Over time, the business grew. We were acquired by Bytes in 2011 on the 1st of August. And that runs through all the way to the merger with Bytes Software Services and Bytes Security Partnerships in 2020 on the 1st of March last year. So it's been an interesting journey. I'll be honest, I've been very, very lucky to participate in that journey and to grow with it. I now find myself not really being able to do technology anymore, and instead getting to run events like this and speak to people like you. But please, when we do meet up, do ask me some very vaguely technical questions, because the only way I can keep my brain working, because I do get a little bit bored of spreadsheets and things like that these days. So this is kind of everything we cover now. We can do the full security lifecycle, and I'm actually very proud of what we offer as a business now. I do think it's quite special in the UK marketplace. I know every reseller says that. But let me explain it through a little bit. And I'm going to start on the blue box on the right-hand side. So I think Bytes is very, very well known for its procurement, for its licensing and procurement side of its business. Pretty much anything you want, anything you need to get hold of, we can get hold of it for you. We can get hold of it for you for a good price. But what we're not necessarily known as is a technology company. When the two businesses were integrated, the role I took and the job title I took as part of that was Group CTO. It's my role to make us a technology company as well as a procurement and licensing company, to make sure that our customers understand we can do technology as well. As a result, we have a full suite of technical professional services. We have asset management, we have optimization, we have all sorts of professional services available. We can also deliver Microsoft cloud services. We have a full suite of managed security services. We have managed SOC, NOC, managed SIM available for our customers, managed firewall, managed IPS, all available to our customers. We have our 24/7 support desk with direct to third line engineer available as part of that. And then the final piece of the puzzle really that's come on stream very, very strongly in the last 18 months, 2 years is our cyber consulting business. So as well as being able to do everything that we were always able to do as Bytes Security Partnerships, but at a greater scale because of our integration, we also have cyber consulting. Cyber consulting is a full PCI QSA. It is an ISF audit practice. We can do virtual CISO out of that. We also have forensics, incident response, cyber essentials, etc., as part of that. So there isn't much we can't do. Did I say pen testing? If I didn't say pen testing, I meant to. There isn't much that we can't do for you as a security reseller. And it's that kind of level and that technical ability that drives us on to set up events like this and make sure that you are getting an understanding of what all of our vendors can do, but also what we think. So what do we think about cloud migration? I'm aware that I only had 10 minutes for this and I'm already at 12 minutes, so I will try and wrap up as quickly as I can now. But for me, migration is quite an interesting topic because the biggest problem with migration is what gets left behind. And that really, for me, is the biggest challenge. It's very easy for businesses to build new into cloud. You know, you've got all your existing on-premise infrastructure, and all of a sudden you go, new requirement, let's put something new in, okay? Very, very simple, if I'm being honest, in the grand scheme of things for businesses to do that. Where businesses struggle is moving workloads into the cloud rather than just creating new workloads, and making sure that it's a seamless experience for their staff and for their customers to make use of those services. And one of our biggest challenges that we see as a security practice now is businesses that have left things behind. You know, an example of that might be you've migrated to Exchange Online and you've still got your 1 or 2 on-premise Exchange servers that you're using for literally AD management fundamentally of that Exchange Online because you went Exchange Hybrid. Exchange Hybrid, you can't turn them off. And then all of a sudden, you've got a whole series of patches that need to be applied to that. Well, in an ideal world, you want to complete that migration. You want to get those servers out of commission. If you deploy new workloads for anything really, when you move it up into the cloud, you want to get the stuff that's on premise off. And you need to make sure you have a toolkit for that to make sure it's seamless all the way, because so often things get left behind. So for me, that's the biggest challenge with migration is, oh, did I skip over a poll? I've just been told about the second poll. Sorry, I completely skipped over it and ignored it, probably because it's my next slide. There we go. I'll go back. Thank you for all responding to it, by the way. You know, for me, migration is very much about seamless experience. And as part of that, making sure that we get rid of the old stuff and that we provide the infrastructure and the tools to not just build new and leave old behind, but to migrate and move that infrastructure and making sure we've got the tools to do all of that. So without further ado, I will shut up. I will hand over to Stephen. Stephen, are you there?
I am here, yes. Good morning.
Excellent. Good morning. So thank you. I pinched 4 minutes of your time, I think, or 3 minutes of your time. So I will shut up and leave you to it. Guys, I have said before, please do ask questions. We'll be monitoring them, and I will be addressing Stephen on the way through. Yes, Stephen, thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you, David. Really appreciate Bytes inviting us to speak to your customers this morning. Yeah, so my name is Stephen Archer. I'm a solutions engineer at F5. I specialize in cloud and automation, DevOps practices. And I've been at F5 for literally, well, in 2 months' time, it will be 10 years. So I've been around a little while. I spent the first 5 years in F5 consulting, working in some of the kind of most important customers, I guess, biggest customers and large financials and so on. And prior to F5, I was actually an F5 customer. So I used to manage the global network for one of the big 3 consulting firms. So I have a kind of strong network engineering background, security background, and so on. But I kind of chose F5 because F5 has always sat in what we like to think of as the strategic point of control between clients and applications. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about a number of subjects. So first, we're going to cover F5's vision. So where F5 are really going, where are we heading? We're going to talk then about how you can try to adopt a secure cloud architecture. We're then going to move on to talk about some kind of fundamentals of application delivery, just explaining actually what application delivery is and what kind of functions it comprises. Then thinking about those functions, how can you deploy them? So what are the different deployment options that F5 offer? And then finally, we're going to talk about a very new acquisition of ours, Volterra, and provide an overview and then kind of go into some use cases to help give an understanding of actually what Volterra is and what the power is. So why does F5 exist? So F5 has been around for around 25 years. And our job, as we see it, is to help customers deliver digital experiences. So we all know that applications are, the critical interface for your consumers. That's only accelerated over the last year, I'm sure, as you all know. But what we've known for a long time, and what this report from AppDynamics backs up, is that if you provide a poor digital experience for your customers, they are very likely to leave your brand. Now, not only are customers kind of demanding more, but there's a shift that's actually happening to you. And what I mean by to you is that it's kind of out of the control of enterprise. So, if we look back, customers of yours would typically be connecting on kind of older style devices. They were slow, didn't have video. Maybe they were connecting on constrained networks, slow dial-up or whatever. And that's really changed, like, beyond imagination, really, to the point where we now have something that's kind of akin to a supercomputer in our pocket. These devices have, masses of spare capacity, and that capacity can be harnessed by your application. The devices themselves are connecting on faster and faster networks. So, if you think about how much or how fast your home Wi-Fi is now, and the fact that we're rolling out 5G networks, this is really causing a fundamental shift in the way that customers expect to experience your applications. And then if we add to that the myriad of different IoT devices that are now connecting in to consume services, and they are consuming services in a completely different way again. And again, these things are essentially out of your control. And what we really think about this is that all of these changes are giving rise to what we're calling digital transformation. And it's not easy, right? If we look at the kind of changes that have happened as a result of all the things I discussed on the previous slide, what you end up with is a really complex and distributed set of applications. The new ways of connecting to these applications, like I mentioned from IoT devices, APIs, for example, gRPC is now gaining traction over HTTP. And then we've got security. So security exposure, and this is massively increasing the security attack surface of your applications, not just because there are more applications, but because the applications and the way that you're delivering them is different. So we're exposing new attack surface. So attackers are coming up with ever more clever ways to attack your applications in ways that you, I guess, previously didn't even realize were possible. And then thirdly, we've got inadequate visibility. So with this move from cloud to hybrid cloud and multi-cloud, it means that we've got multiple silos of visibility. So different teams in different environments with different tools. So trying to see and understand the visibility from end to end across all of those silos is really difficult, if not impossible. So with all these silos, we're really creating operational complexity. So you can see in this picture that we've got three different environments, and we've kind of drawn them as three different environments because usually they require, or typically you have different silos that are maintaining these different environments. So we've got teams like Dev and DevOps, NetOps, SecOps, whatever you call them, and they tend to have different sets of expertise, and they don't necessarily always work well together. You've got your on-prem environment, you've got your public cloud environments, maybe multiple public cloud environments, and then you've got your edge environments as well. And your job is to try and put all of this together, right? So how do you do that? How do you provide the technical consistency across these environments? How do you just like stitch it all together? I mean, even that in itself is challenging. How do you reduce the attack surface and minimize the risk? And how do you provide the visibility across all of these environments that you've kind of cobbled together from different technologies? So this set of challenges really is the thing that F5 is set out to resolve. So how are we going to try and do that? So we believe that a distributed cloud architecture is the solution to all of these problems. And if we look at the kind of journey, you started out with a data center, and that journey then moved on to hybrid cloud, where we talk about lift and shift. So customers started trying to move a subset of applications to the hybrid cloud environment. We more often than not kind of look at that as lift and fail, because the customers that were doing that didn't necessarily go that well. And then we've got multi-cloud, because customers started to realize that the different cloud providers excel in different areas. And for example, you may have an application that performs better in Azure compared to AWS, for example. So we then move on to distributed cloud, which is what we're calling our Edge 2.0 initiative. Now, if we look at the kind of progression of Edge, initially, and the CDN providers, they were really trying to solve a problem that was just you could describe as the worldwide wait. So this is trying to cache elements of your application in points of presence that are closer to the consumer. And this solution really relies on a number of things, but mainly a large number of POPs with immense amounts of storage to be able to store copies of as much as feasibly possible of customer websites. Now, we're not the only organization to kind of see that this shift is happening. So the CDN vendors themselves are looking to try and enhance their capabilities. So they're using their POPs with all of the storage that they have, and making it available for you to run code for your applications in their environments. But the problem with this is that you have to completely refactor or rewrite your code to run on their platform. And you're limited to running your code in the POPs that your provider operates. Now, with Edge 2.0, this fundamentally changes the game. You're now creating, or have the ability to create, a distributed cloud by meshing all of the sites together that you have. Any device in any of those environments can then talk to any other, obviously with appropriate security controls, and I'll talk a little bit later about how you can do that. You then create a platform through a distributed Kubernetes environment that allows you to run your application and your application code exactly the same way anywhere that you've got compute, network, and storage. So it's not just limited to the edges that we create or the POP locations that we have. It should be and could be expanded to any location where you have compute, network, and storage. So that could be your own premises, it could be your cloud environments, it could be your branches, your factories, and more, wherever you think that you could put some capacity. And really this Edge 2.0 is our objective. And it's the reason why F5 has made the acquisitions that it has. So hopefully, many of you will already know and understand Big IP. Big IP is a product that F5 has been selling for a long time. It's been around, in various iterations for best part of 25 years. And it's still the world's most powerful, flexible, reliable application delivery controller. And F5 is still massively investing R&D into that platform. And we've got next generations of that platform that will be coming out in the not too distant future. We then made an acquisition of NGINX. So NGINX is a brand that is loved by the dev and DevOps community. And F5, as a result of this acquisition, has now got access, let's say, to the world's most widely deployed web server. It's an incredibly lightweight proxy. It's, in fact, if you look at the code, it's less than 2 megabytes in size. It's perfect for modern development practices. And it's allowed us, and it's going to continue to allow us to apply our technology in new, different and exciting ways, including deployment of F5 security inside container environments. Because one of the first things that we did when we acquired NGINX is that we made our WAF technology, we containerized it and made it available to use in conjunction with NGINX. We then acquired Shape, and Shape has some really interesting technology. They use some really clever techniques to better identify humans, which means that you can validate a user and streamline that user's authentication based on their past behavior. In fact, some customers have used this technology to entirely remove client authentication or customer authentication. And this reduces friction. We've seen it increase customer revenues because more customers are happy to use the site. We kind of liken this to if you shop on Amazon. When was the last time that you logged in? The fact that you can leave these long login times is that only if you have security that you can absolutely rely on. But ultimately, it really just all drives to kind of improve this digital experience that I keep mentioning. Now, the cutting edge AI backend and analytical capabilities that we got through the acquisition of Volterra allow us to unlock more value, more critical business insights for our customers now, and more in the future. We've got really big plans in this area. And then finally, and most recently, our Volterra acquisition has given us a SaaS platform. Actually, it's a SaaS platform and a PaaS platform, and we'll kind of explain a little bit more about what that means later in the presentation. But it's a SaaS platform where we're going to take all of these functions from all of these independent product sets that you've been able to buy from F5, and you can continue to buy from F5. And we can add them all into the Volterra platform so that you can consume those functions in completely new ways. So to sum all this up, if you've got a SaaS model and a SaaS controller that sits in the middle of your environment that can control all of your application services, then that's going to reduce your total cost of ownership by reducing complexity and adding simplicity. So you can have a kind of like a build it once. So let's say a NetOps person can build a policy, and then you can apply it everywhere. So every time you bring a new site, you automatically have that policy applied to that site. So the outcomes that kind of stem from this are that you gain, you're reducing operational complexity. You get agility because of that, consistency across environments. Your security is improved because everyone is working within the same framework. So security or SecOps and NetOps can define the policies, and those policies can be used with ease by Dev and DevOps. And again, because the SaaS controller sits in the middle of everything, you can now see and get the visibility and end-to-end observability, and also the automatic correlation of events between all of these different application delivery components. Now, not all of these components are there today. I mean, I said this is the F5 vision, so this is where we're heading. Over time, we really want to start adding all of our kind of class-leading technology into an already capable Volterra platform. So this is kind of how I guess we kind of see the world and how we see the world evolving. And we want to solve these complex problems so that you can concentrate on delivering applications and digital experiences to your customers. So we're now going to talk a little bit about secure cloud architecture. Now, we've been talking to customers about secure cloud architectures for a number of years now. And I've personally worked with hundreds of customers on cloud-related projects. And there are common themes that I've seen again and again. And we want to talk about some of the things that we think are important, things that you should do, and maybe some things that you should avoid. Now, in most cases, it's a question that we always ask of customers, really, is, why are you going to cloud? It's so often forgotten. Somebody somewhere has made a decision and it's just that we're going to cloud, and we've kind of forgotten why. So it's really, when you kind of dig into it, most often it's to increase speed to meet business objectives faster. Now, through speed, you often end up forgetting a number of things, and security controls are one of the things that often get left behind. We have often seen that in many organizations, it's maybe a kind of, an isolated development practice with a first team to move into the cloud. And they were trying to release themselves from the constraints that were kind of holding them back within the on-premise environment. And when they move to the cloud, they have skills that are kind of focused on development and presenting applications, but not necessarily on infrastructure and infrastructure security. So even though they may have tried and done a good job of securing the applications, they don't necessarily have all the skills required to provide the security. So then what we've seen is that NetOps and SecOps discover that these teams are in the cloud, and then they're falling over themselves trying to build the security after the fact to try and protect these applications. So there's still this kind of shift left, and the term shift left maybe needs some explanation for some people, but it kind of means shifting towards the application and the application development side of the business, where more and more responsibility is being loaded onto those teams, and security is a big part of that. So in order to leverage security in the cloud and kind of maintain the speed, you really need to tools that can help you do that. You need to be able to give the design and the definition of the policy to the security and the NetOps team, and those policies need to be leveraged simply by the development and the DevOps teams. So what precisely is secure cloud architecture from F5's perspective? So when we work with customers, what we're trying to do is define a pattern that you can create an environment that your team can build from. So something that's flexible and repeatable, and we tend to adapt it for individual customers. If you're familiar with Conway's law, that tells us that because every organization is different, it's necessarily going to follow that any architectural design and pattern will be different, because it has to follow the operating model and the structure of that organization. It's also a practical approach to balancing operations and innovation at scale, and a framework that customers can adopt to use to create a commonality across multi or hybrid cloud. Now, this is a theme that you're going to see throughout this presentation, this idea of a framework that can be adopted across the organization. Now, what it isn't is that it's not purely focused on any specific products. It's not an exact reference architecture, so it's not a document that we just give you and say, here you go, here's your secure cloud architecture. It's not a product or SKU, so you can't go to Bytes and say, I'd like to buy a secure cloud architecture, please. And it's not meant to cover every aspect in consideration, because F5 has expertise in specific areas. Bytes have wider expertise in a wider number of areas than F5 do. So we kind of focus where our strengths are. Now, cloud adoption frameworks are, there are different flavors of these available from all of the main cloud providers, but they all have the same themes, right? There's, this is an example here. So, if I kind of look at the kind of main pillars of all of these frameworks, F5 slots very nicely into all of them. So if you dig into the operational excellence side of things, what they're talking about here is really themes like anticipating failure and performing operations as code. So F5 has, the broadest set of availability features on the market. I mean, it's one of the things that our very first product was designed to make an application available. Load balancer, it was the first load balancer. And that's really what we've been doing since that day. So core foundation of F5. Performing operations as code. So all of our platforms have the ability to be automated, right? We've had an API on our platform for 15 years. I mean, we had a SOAP API before SOAP was actually ratified with an official RFC. So we've had an API for a long time, and we've gone through many iterations. We've learned through experience, and I'll maybe touch on it a little bit later. But now our big IP platforms have a new set of APIs that we call the automation toolchain, and these are a set of declarative, idempotent APIs that make it really, really easy to automate the deployment of our devices. You then got security, so the second pillar. So, things like protecting data in transit and at rest, implementing security at all layers, implementing a strong identity foundation, and enabling traceability. So again, all things that F5 can help with. Reliability, I mean, this is kind of related to the operational excellence, and I've already kind of covered that. We then got performance efficiency. So some of the things that the cloud providers talk about here is making sure that you experiment more often. And if you think about this from an application point of view, we're talking about things like A/B testing and canary deployments. So again, F5 has always been able to help provide the ability to give applications A/B testing. Apologies for my phone pinging in the background. So requiring things like A/B testing means that you have to have the ability to do complex layer 7 rules, something that F5 is obviously really strong at. And then another kind of element of this performance efficiency is democratizing advanced technology. So, if you can buy as a service, or buy technologies that are easier to consume, that have declarative APIs, for example. And then we've got cost optimization. So, if you're going to adopt a consumption model, make sure it's the right one. So for some organizations, it's an hourly billing type model. Some customers want the flexibility of subscription or ELA, and others, because of the way that they're funded, want to buy technology outright. And of course, you can do all of those things with F5. And another part of cost optimization is consolidating features. So another thing that F5 is really good at, because we have many features and functions that you can consolidate into a single platform. Now, another of the kind of fundamental frameworks, I suppose, that the cloud providers give you is the assessments. So Azure call it the 5 R's of rationalization. AWS call it the 6 R's assessment. But really, they're all telling you the same thing. They're saying that before you start moving to the cloud, you need to understand how many applications you've got, and you need to decide what you're going to do with all of them. And this is one of the biggest pitfalls that we see. And we're going to have a poll question on this a little bit later. But we really need to understand our application portfolio. And the 6 R's here, so rehost, like, do we want to lift and shift? Now, replatform is very similar. We refer to it as lift, tinker, and shift. So making some minor changes in order to be able to rehost, to replatform in the public cloud. Refactoring is completely rewriting or re-architecting your application, maybe making it containerized. So decomposing it into microservices. Now, I suppose the simple truth is there are not enough development resources in the world to be able to refactor all applications for the cloud. That's just a simple truth. So we can't refactor everything. So I think that's one of the things that you have to understand early on, is that you're not going to be able to do that unless you're very lucky and you were born in the cloud. I guess you don't need to do that. Repurchase means that you may look to, rather than having your own application, maybe you'll look to leverage SaaS instead. Retain means that you'll keep it as it is and continue to run it where it's running today. And of course, retire means that you've determined that you don't need that application anymore. And that may be because during refactoring, you've added capability into an existing application, or maybe through repurchasing, the SaaS provider gives you more functionality and you can retire another application as a result. Now, I just wanted to touch on the definition for cloud native. Now, it's a common kind of fallacy, I suppose, that when people talk about cloud native, often they mean tools provided by the cloud provider. So, for example, Azure, you can leverage a load balancer from Azure. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the feature that you're using that's provided by the cloud provider, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's cloud native. But it also means that there are technologies that you can leverage that are not provided by the CSP, the cloud provider, that are cloud native. So just make sure that that's understood. It's a common misconception. So a couple of other things that we've learned, really, really important, is people and process. And I think the number one mistake that we make is that we see customers that haven't created a cloud practice or a cloud center of excellence. And this really just means bringing people together from different teams and working together to create your secure cloud architecture. And without that, you're really going to struggle. Discovery, I've mentioned this, right? You really must have a very clear understanding of how many applications you have, take them through the assessment and understand what you're going to do with each of them. And then we've got the patterns and flexibility. So I think accepting that you are multi-cloud is a really important one. Make sure that everything is a service. So, build it once and use it repeatedly many times. And you're also going to have to deal with SaaS and PaaS and IaaS. So make sure that you have a design that takes all of those into account. Make sure that you keep it simple. And this is possibly one of the biggest ones. Time and time again, we see customers come to us with very complex designs with multiple tiers of infrastructure in the cloud environment, all with their own peculiarities in terms of the way that they translate addresses and fail over in particular cloud environments. And of course, you try and build that same environment in two clouds, and it just doesn't work. The constructs are so different. It's really difficult to do that. So strip it back, keep it simple. If you can, even deploy single instances of infrastructure devices. If you need a chain of them, fair enough, but keep them simple, keep it a single chain, and then do your distribution or load balancing at tier one above all of that. So another things that we've learned is that generally customers start by using the cloud provider tools, and when they fail, and only when they fail, do they then start to look to vendors like F5. And we totally understand why customers do that. I mean, you start playing with a cloud environment, and the tools are there. You think, yeah, okay, I need to do my certification, so you're trained in how to deploy that cloud provider's tools. And from that perspective, it's relatively easy. But it's only through experience and starting to load up services that you realize that many of these tools are only really just good enough. And that's the cloud provider's intention, right? They're giving you tools that are good enough to get going, and they don't expect that they're always going to be sufficient for enterprise in all cases. So part of the problem is failing to test at scale. And it's usually at scale where we start to see problems. I've mentioned overcomplicated designs, so just keep it simple, and you can't refactor everything. So there are many complex use cases when you move applications to cloud that can't be refactored, that F5 solves problems for. So things, complex layer 7 use cases, security requirements, and so on that you just cannot solve with the cloud provider tooling. Okay, so I think it's time to kind of pause. I'm going to have a sip of water and see if there's any questions.
So we have had one. Let me just pull it up. Just to reiterate to everybody, just before I go through this, over on the right-hand side of the menu, by the poll stuff, is where you can put your questions in. But the question we have had in is around agile working, for IT teams. Obviously, this is the hot topic. So with agile working on the increase, what are the key considerations from IT teams from a security perspective to protect cloud environment, monitoring end user endpoint devices, and considering public versus private cloud? So, I guess ultimately what we're asking is what about the monitoring? What about the endpoint and the devices when we're working with these cloud environments? In your opinion, what are the key considerations from a security perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, I keep talking about speed, and the challenge in cloud environments is, that whatever security you implement, because you need this speed, it has to be automated. Even if And again, we see customers trying to find the balance, and it's a difficult balance to find. So what we quite often see is that customers will define what I would call the kind of minimum organizational level policy, kind of convert that to, a policy for the vendor of your security vendor of your choice. And that is implemented when the service is first delivered. And then they know from day one that they at least have a baseline policy that they've met. And then because the service is now available, they can then look to enhance that security without, kind of holding back the development of the application and the deployment of new features. But it really has to all come down to automation. Now, if I look at the way that you can implement security, I mean, we've got extremes, right? If you want the strongest possible security, you need skilled SOC engineers who understand products deeply, who understand security deeply, and they can handcraft security policy that aligns perfectly with the application. Okay, but you can't really automate that. On the other extreme, right, if you want to automate security policy, it can't be tightly coupled to the application. It has to be more generic, and therefore the efficacy of that security is not as strong. And that's the kind of dilemma at the moment. And in the middle is intelligence, right? So we as F5 are working hard to try and build intelligence into our products so that they sort of self-conform to your applications, so that you have the best of both, really, that you have the strong security efficacy and the ability to automate. Now, that area in the middle, it's backed by our kind of AI and machine learning. It's a very, very complex area, and anybody that tells you that they're doing that well as a vendor, I think is probably stretching the truth a little bit. But we are working very, very hard in that area, and that's where the future and the direction of travel is. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Stephen. I think that, as you say, that does cover it. So, couple of points. So you asked the question earlier, you kind of posed the question, how many, do you know exactly how many applications you have in your inventory? More said no than yes, which I think is what we would expect, isn't it, frankly?
Did anybody say yes?
Yes, some people did say yes. I mean, you and I might both be of the opinion that they're fibbing, but some people did say yes.
Well, do you know what? When I've had people in the room in front of me, and I'm talking about many customers, and I've asked every single one of them that same question, and when I've been able to look them in the eye, 0 people have told me that they know how many applications they have.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, there's a wider audience here, right? So that's great. And I mean, if you have managed to identify how many applications you got, I will tell you, I am impressed.
Well, I mean, do you know what? Maybe we should have, asked 2 questions. How many of you think you know, and how many actually know? It is a tricky one. I mean, we run a fairly tight ship, but even now, just occasionally, I'll trip over something that's being used by somebody. For instance, and I won't call out the marketing team that have done a fantastic job in arranging this event, but you suddenly trip over, they use a tool for sharing files with a partner for creating marketing material that the IT department doesn't know about, or the security department doesn't know about. And I would say that is an application that's in your inventory. And I think that's where people do get caught out. They think they know, actually, and I think very few businesses know all of them. Yeah. Other question, just quickly, we've got time for one more. I'm just trying to think if there's any of them really that are relevant at the moment, because we have got a couple of others. What about government customers, Paul? Are government customers as well as corporates using this architecture and these solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I guess a few years back, government entities were quite nervous about moving to the cloud and concerned about the security. But yeah, I mean, we as F5 have worked with a number of governments I can think of. I mean, obviously won't mention which governments, but the governments that we're working with have the most stringent of requirements, and we've been able to satisfy their most stringent requirements from a security point of view. So absolutely yes. And there are other types of organization that have extremely stringent security requirements, and yeah, we have like a more complex end of a secure architecture that meets all of their needs, and then we have kind of different levels for different appetites, let's say.
Okay, cool. Good news. So I think that's it for the questions. I think we can just carry on into your next section. So please, people, if you can keep firing them in, it gives us something to talk about. What I might do is save them all for the final Q&A now and the rest of it. But people, please do keep asking us questions. So I'll leave you to it again now, Paul. Paul, looking at the wrong name. Stephen, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry.
Getting way too confused today. Sorry, Stephen.
That's okay. Yeah, so I mean, I'll reiterate what Dave was just saying, but please do ask us questions. If only to see us suffer and make my life difficult. Makes life a bit more interesting. Okay, so this is a little about F5. I'm not sure if I'm seeing a problem on the slide here, but I'm seeing a white circle, but normally that's got a little F5 logo in it. So this is just a little bit of background about F5. So we all know about the application data path. So we're talking about the path between an end user and their browser or an IoT device, and the application business logic running on a web or an application server, or even running serverless. And between them, you have a whole set of application services that you need in order to deliver those applications. And we're thinking about things like the application and web server itself. So looking on the right-hand side there. You then maybe need an ingress controller, so providing ingress and security into a cloud, a container environment. Things like API gateway, so providing control over your APIs, providing security for your APIs, providing rate limiting capabilities, developer portals, all of those kind of things. You've then got load balancing. So, and of course, F5 has been in this space for an awful long time. So even things like load balancing encompasses capabilities like TCP optimization, something that's kind of often overlooked. We've got application security, so providing deep analysis of underlying HTTP that's been normalized, so that we can apply signatures, so that we can identify known attacks, but also providing positive security models, so that you can kind of map in what is considered good for your application, and then we can reject anything that doesn't conform to that. So that allows you to protect yourself against zero-day or unknown attacks. We then got things like DNS, global server load balancing, DNS security, DNSSEC, DDoS mitigation, obviously another key kind of function that you need in your application services armory. So being able to not just mitigate DDoS attacks from within your data center, so thinking about computational attacks, so DDoS attacks that aren't necessarily trying to swamp you with huge quantity of attack traffic, but just targeting a complex URL on a website and just hitting that repeatedly. And then we've got anti-fraud and anti-bot requirements, where we're again, just trying to identify who is a human and trying to make their life easy. We don't want to be sticking captures and trying to identify which square's got a traffic light in it and which one's got a bus in it and whatever else. We want to make our customers' life easy. Now, if we look at that kind of end to end, actually the anti-fraud and anti-bot mitigation capabilities partly comprise JavaScript, which injects into the browser. So F5 literally is, we've got more capability, the most comprehensive set of services on Earth, and we go from the browser itself all the way through to the application server. And with that kind of unique coverage, we've got different kind of methods of providing those services. So from managed services to SaaS options, and obviously you can buy it and operate it yourself. Now, with all of those kind of end-to-end functions, we have the ability to obtain telemetry from the control plane and the data plane of all of those elements. And then we can look to provide new business insights from the analytics engine that we're building in the background. I wanted to kind of go through some of the different ways that you can deploy F5 technology. So first and foremost, a typical deployment you would see in a data center, you have a big IP, whether that be virtual or running on F5 hardware. So F5 hardware that is designed specifically for application delivery. Now, we sit logically between the application consumer, whether that be a user, an IoT device, or whatever, and more typically, we sit in front of traditional applications. Now, we can also, and I don't know if it's my version of this slide here, but the big IP device there is sitting on the edge of the container environment, so that the big IP can have one leg in the real network and one leg in the container environment overlay. So the big IP can become a member of the Kubernetes cluster. We also have a component that runs inside the environment that allows, whilst you're creating standard Kubernetes constructs like ingress, when you create an ingress, it sends out REST calls to the big IP to create configuration on the big IP that allows you to ingress traffic into the container environment. We also have the ability to run Nginx wholly within the container environment. So I mentioned earlier that Nginx has a tiny footprint, just 2 megabytes in size. And along with F5's security capabilities that are now leveraged through Nginx App Protect, you can run all of this within a container environment. And for the best of both worlds, we've got new capability that we call Ingress Link, where you can run big IP on the outside of the environment. Maybe that's controlled by your networks team. And then you can, there's let's say, communication between the big IP and the Nginx ingress within the container environment. And the Nginx ingress is in the control of the development and the DevOps team. So you can have a delineation of control. All of the configuration to allow the ingress through big IP to Nginx to the container is all created through a custom resource definition, which again is a Kubernetes construct. And underpinning all of this, we have management platforms. So BigIQ is the centralized management platform for the big IP range of products. We have Nginx controller, which has been developed specifically with dev and DevOps in mind, and allows you to deploy the entire lifecycle of Nginx instances, for example. Allows an easy way of configuring APIs. And then, of course, we've got Terraform providers and Ansible modules and more integrations with other automation tools, REST APIs, and so on, that allow you to easily automate the deployment of all of these. Now, in terms of high availability, on the left there with the traditional data centers and traditional applications, I mean, we've been doing this a long time. It's well understood how we provide HA, sub-second failover. We can do the same for container environments. Nginx itself, because you can create Nginx as a daemon set or as a specific number of replicas, it can automatically scale within the container environment to provide, kind of unlimited ingress capability. And again, with our ingress link, it's a combination of those two things. Now in cloud, things are a little different, and they're a little different in each cloud because the different cloud providers give you different constructs to work with. So the first kind of option that I'm showing here is deploying BigIP as a virtual instance into a public cloud environment and using API failover. So the left-hand BigIP is active, and in the event that it fails, the standby BigIP sends API calls to the cloud provider, and it's telling the cloud provider to detach your service IP addresses from the original BigIP and to attach them to the BigIP that is going active. So that kind of method of failover is very common. It's very reliable, and depending on the cloud provider, the failover time is 10 seconds and more in different cloud providers. The second method of deployment in public cloud is to use one of the cloud providers' layer 4 load balancers, and actually across all the clouds, it's actually Nginx open source is performing that role, and you can use that simple load balancer to distribute traffic across HA pairs of BigIPs. It can be active standby, it can be active, and in fact, it could be autoscale. And in the case of autoscale, we use Azure storage or AWS S3 buckets for sharing the state and the configuration between those devices, so that we can automatically configure them when they scale up, and then obviously remove them when they scale down. And then finally, we've got the kind of simplicity model. So I've drawn the little kind of vertical lines there to separate them, to show that these are individual standalone devices. And this is really the best way for running immutable infrastructure. So immutable means that once you've deployed it, you don't really change it. If you have a change to the configuration, you basically destroy the existing one, you deploy a new one. So if you're using DNS, and actually, if you look at the way that the cloud providers do high availability across availability zones, they're all using DNS. So if you're in cloud, you're using DNS for availability anyway. So it makes sense, and it's more it's a cloud native design, actually, is to use DNS as the tier 1 load balancer and then run your infrastructure immutably beneath that. So in this example, I was deploying a new version. I would just deploy 3 more BigIPs, all on the new version. I would test, make sure that it's all working, and then I would remove them from the DNS load balancing. Now, in addition to the centralized control and automation capabilities I mentioned previously, obviously in public cloud, we have made available Azure Resource Manager templates, AWS CloudFormation templates, and Google Cloud templates for all of these use cases, so that you can easily deploy. You can use them as they are, or you can fork them and you can modify them to meet your needs. Now, For containerized applications in public cloud, again, you can use BigIP to provide ingress into those environments. You can use Nginx as the ingress controller for those environments, and you can use both. Again, for the same reasons I mentioned earlier. If you've got strict controls around, only the dev team really have any business being inside the container environment. Maybe they want to use Nginx to do all their kind of complex layer 7 rules for ingress. And the NetOps team require a minimum level of security, and they want to implement it with BigIP, and that sits outside. And then we can use Ingress Link to provide the glue between them. Now, if you want to buy your security from F5 as a managed service, then you can use Silverline. So Silverline is our cloud-based, fully managed by the Silverline SOC engineers. So they will, in fact, you can automate the deployment of a Silverline proxy, and a Silverline proxy really provides an Anycast IP address northbound out of Silverline, so that all your app consumers can get to the service. And then from Silverline in the back end, we have a secure connection to your cloud environment. So your cloud environment only allows Silverline to access. The Silverline is a globally distributed service that provides massive DDoS mitigation, a web application firewall for each individual application. So it's tailor-made, handcrafted by the SOC, so that you've got all the security that you need, and the responsibility is kind of offloaded onto F5. Now, in order to kind of utilize this this solution, you still need, within your cloud environment, you need to have all of the cloud constructs, so public IP addresses, so like elastic IPs, all of the routing, security groups, and that in itself is not simple and straightforward. As soon as you start to use public IP addresses, you have one-to-one NATs that you need to deal with. So there's a lot of complexity there. And these diagrams, these simplified diagrams, really kind of obfuscate all of that complexity. So this is the first look at F5's latest acquisition, Volterra. And I'm just giving you a kind of brief overview here because I'm going to go into it in more detail. But if you imagine Volterra in place of Silverline, because actually we are already in the business of integrating Silverline and Volterra. So we are deploying Volterra equipment in Silverline POP locations, and we've deployed and shipped F5 and Silverline hardware into Volterra locations, so that you're going to have a massively capable security on-ramp. And that's really what you can think of Volterra as, is an on-ramp to your cloud environments, but an on-ramp that automatically deploys the connectivity into the cloud environments. But as I kind of mentioned earlier with Edge 2.0, this is not limited to just the Volterra locations in your cloud environments. You can deploy this into branches, into factories, into offices, anywhere really that you have, like I mentioned, storage, compute, and networking. So let's talk about Volterra in a little bit more detail. So Volterra relatively recently came out of stealth mode. They've won a whole raft of awards, and they have currently 70 global customers that are running on their platform. And some of those are huge organizations. So F5 was looking specifically, as I mentioned earlier, we had a trajectory that we were trying to follow in terms of our acquisitions, and this was the last piece of the puzzle. And I can tell you that everybody within F5 is really massively excited about Volterra. And the more, I mean, me personally, even the more I play with the technology, the more excited I become, the more capability I discover. It's pretty impressive. So really what we're talking about with Volterra is that it's an outcome-driven platform. So it is putting the focus back on the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So reducing complexity, faster time to value, better end user performance. And it's really made up of three components. There's the Volterra console, which is the global controller that allows you to deliver the logic. It life cycles all of the components that are deployed into your environments. It provides centralized analytics. It also does correlation between all of the different application delivery functions. And it allows you to apply policy. Now, Vault Mesh is for the routing and services engine. So it allows you to kind of glue your environments together. So, for example, in public clouds, you install a small ISO on either bare metal, or you can deploy it as a virtual machine or as a Kubernetes container. And all it really has is the code sufficient to boot up and phone home. And once it connects back to the Volterra regional edges, it will then complete the installation, which is delivered from the SaaS platform itself. And then we have Vault Stack, which is a distributed Kubernetes cluster. Now, the component capabilities, I'm not kind of going to go into in a little bit more detail. I think it makes more sense to give you, some kind of diagrams, and we'll kind of talk through them. So first, this is the combined Volterra and Silverline network, which I said that this work is kind of ongoing. So at the moment, we have 33 POPs, over 14 terabits of capacity. And this is the network that is going to allow us to create our platform. So in the middle, you have this Volterra global network. And that is made up of the kind of 33 POPs, so the regional edges. And if you wanted to, you could deploy your application onto our Kubernetes that's distributed at our edge, and you don't need anything else. But it also, the regional edges allow you to connect to Vault Mesh and Vault Stack instances that you deploy into your cloud environment. And those are what we call the customer edge. So you can see that once you create this connectivity, you can use Volterra's global network to create the connectivity to stitch all of your environments together really simply. Now, Volterra, in a nutshell, we're looking here at obviously three different environments. So Volterra is an Uber platform that spans all of the locations. We use our private backbone to connect them, but we can also use, if you've got your own connectivity, your own backbone, we can actually create a mesh between your sites using your own backbone, so you don't have to use Volterra's network. If you do use Volterra's network, for example, from public cloud, then what it allows you to do is to avoid costs for egressing to the internet. So the cloud providers charge an extortionate amount of money for internet bandwidth. So we're roughly about 1/10 of the cost. So you egress your public cloud environment across our direct connects to our global network, and then you can egress to the internet via our Anycast global network. You can deploy within a number of different options, like I said, hardware from industrial gateways to servers that we sell, VMs, cloud instances in public cloud, which are automatically deployed, by the way, from the SaaS platform. You can discover applications in environments. So on the left public cloud environment there, for example, the Volterra node there has discovered an application, and then you choose through policy to make that application available in other locations. And because the policy defines all of the application services that you require in front of that application, those application services are delivered to the edges with the application itself. And then, of course, we've got the distributed Kubernetes cluster that allows you to deploy your application code wherever you want to deploy it. So finally, we've got the fact that obviously all of this is delivered from the SaaS platform itself. And we allow you to manage your entire environment as a cloud, a single logical cloud. And David, I know I'm close to time. So I've got a number of, I was going to talk about probably 2 or 3 use cases, but I'll stick to one. And then I think we'll finish up for questions. So
good plan.
So I think from a use case point of view, the most important one really is multi-cloud networking, and this is just another view of what I showed earlier. So you can see in this picture that in the different environments, I've got different colored dots. So in AWS, I've got yellow service. These dots describe a service or an application. In Azure, I've got blue. Now, the Volterra nodes in those environments discover those applications through various means, service discovery, or you can, using Kubernetes or whatever. And then you can choose to expose that application into other sites. And the way that we're doing this, it means that you don't have to worry about overlapping address space within your environments. The cost of interconnect bandwidth I mentioned, we're about a tenth of the cost, but it's also abstracting away all of the complex stitching that you need to deliver your applications to the internet. So the public IP addressing, the routing, security groups. Now, we can completely replace all the security groups. When you deliver a Volterra node into your environment, it will consume all of your security groups. It will modify your routing so that your routing now goes out via the Volterra node. And it massively simplifies, we see customers who've got literally hundreds of VNets and VPCs, and interconnecting them all, is a really difficult thing to do. And of course, in AWS, you have constructs like Transit Gateway, and you don't in Azure. So how can you make the routing policy consistent across all the environments? And that's one of the things that Volterra allows you to do. So with that, I will hand back to David. And apologies for overrunning a little bit. I'm just going to kind of click through.
There we go. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. It's certainly quite illuminating from my point of view. There's some of this stuff, particularly around the Volterra piece, I hadn't actually had a chance to see before. So thank you very much for the update on it. Just to give you a clue on the third poll that we did, do you have challenges with connectivity to or between clouds? Fundamentally, it was near enough 50-50. Yes, 45%, no, 55%. 33 answers, so it wasn't as if it was only sort of 10 people. But it's interesting. You could look at it and say, wow, half people don't have any problems with connectivity. But you look at it and say, well, half people do have problems with connectivity. So I think that's an interesting result. Is that unusual from your point of view, or is that what you pretty much expect to see?
Yeah, I think it's mainly dependent on, a couple of things. One, whether you've purchased direct connects to your cloud providers yourself, and a lot of customers are trying to, I was talking to a very large UK bank earlier this week, and they're trying to build an environment purely to do like an on-ramp for their cloud environments, where they're looking to build a colo with cloud interconnects to all the different clouds. And trying to figure out how they would build the security to control access between those clouds. And they were blown away when we showed them that Volterra is exactly that and more, and it's SaaS. So there are larger customers that have definitely got this problem. Now, if you've got direct connects, maybe you don't have such a problem. And maybe if you're small, you don't have such a problem. But I think if you're very large, you probably do have a problem. And by large, I mean having many environments, so many VNets, many VPCs, that's where the problems with scale start to arise. And also, yeah, if you don't have direct connects and you're having to do all of your stitching with an SD-WAN solution or VPN tunnels or whatever else, then again there is complexity there.
Okay, cool. I mean, I certainly agree with that, and that's certainly some of the similar conversations to the ones we've been having. So we just need to wrap up now. We're due for an 11 o'clock finish. We've got one last poll for everybody to respond to, which I'll just bring to your attention. Shameless question from us, really, is which areas would you benefit from speaking to us about? Obviously, we don't just do this wholly for the good of our heart, mainly for the good of our heart, but not wholly. We would like to talk to you about some of the potential follow-up activities from here. I think, as Stephen has covered with F5 and the F5 platform, it is a very good platform for supporting cloud migration, and even if it's private cloud to a different form of private cloud, any form of migration, any form of high availability and balancing and all of that kind of stuff, it is a very, very strong platform. So, we've got 4 options there when it comes to either cloud migration planning, securing cloud migrations, easing, well, it's more than that. I think we've got 6, haven't we? Easing user experience, etc. Please do pitch in. Please do ask any questions of your account manager. And I think that's pretty much it for today. I don't think we've got much else to cover. I normally forget something. So while we've got 2 minutes left, I'm just giving our team the opportunity to throw any questions at me that they might have in the background. Just while they're doing, go on, Stephen.
Yeah, I was going to say I did completely forget to mention that my colleague Kieran Shepherd is back with you on Thursday, I think.
Awesome.
And one of the reasons I didn't really go into any depth about security is that Kieran's coming to do that on Thursday.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much for that. Everybody, we'll leave you in peace for a little bit. That's been an hour and a half. I hope you've all found it informative. I will see you all again at 11:30 for our next session. Stephen, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's really appreciated. And certainly, I think it was really useful for everybody. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me along. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.